The Oregon Ducks have earned their ticket for a rematch with Washington. I'll tell you what, man, it's fitting this is in Las Vegas because it will be a movie of a title fight. Like you see a lot of those UFC matches and boxing matches happen in Vegas. This is fitting because this will be a heavyweight bout, and I love that we get a rematch for this. Oregon handling business this past, I guess it was Friday, over Oregon State. Final score was 31-7. Oregon was just commanding in every sense of this game. I don't want to lean too much into this game because it's kind of in the rearview mirror. But overall, like, Oregon got leverage and then just delivered haymakers. Like, I think Michigan, whenever they get up on you, they really kind of squeeze the life out of you and they run the football, and it's like holding a heavy weight on your back over time. It sort of just suffocates you. Oregon's kind of that team in the same sense. When they get leverage, like, you're in trouble, but they don't really squeeze you. Like, they get leverage and then they just start throwing just haymakers at your face, and it's a pretty quick knockout, if you will, for Oregon. And they really made that happen a couple of times throughout this game. So we'll talk about it here, but first things first, Oregon fans. Hey, y'all got a big game this upcoming Friday, rather. And we're going to give you our pick in that game on Tuesday. So we'll have our full prediction for the Pac-12 title game Tuesday on this show, The Hard Count. Oregon fans, once y'all subscribe to the channel, we don't want y'all to miss a minute of what we got going on here. We got a lot to talk about with your Ducks going forward, so make sure you're subscribed. We appreciate y'all in advance for that. Also, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram, and let me know your thoughts leading up to this title game and leading up to the potential of a college football playoff berth for your Ducks, man. Exciting time. What a time to be alive, as Drake in Future would say. Going back to what I said, when Oregon gets leverage on you, when they find themselves up 7, they really just start delivering punches to the jaw. And we saw that in this game, and I love the aggression from Dan Lanning because he knew what his football team was capable of. He knew what his offense was capable of with Bo Nix. So they're getting down towards the end of the first half, and Dan Lanning's calling timeouts. He's saying, hey, we want to get the ball again. Give our quarterback a minute, less than a minute to go, that's fine. We like our chances. And Oregon ended up doing that and then pretty much never looked back from that point forward after scoring 14 in the second quarter. I mean, it was just an all-out, all-gas, no-brakes kind of operation for them from that point forward. So what I want to make sure we talk about here as a whole for Oregon, when we zoom out here, the feeling I get is the moment for Oregon never really impacts them. Like, across the college football landscape, we saw different teams have trouble in their rivalry game, and that's pretty common, honestly. Like, we don't, on this show at least, we don't dock you for having trouble with your rival, regardless of their record. Like Alabama struggling with Auburn, Florida State having trouble with Florida. I mean, we could go down the line here. Georgia having a little bit of trouble with Georgia Tech, if you even want to call it trouble. Like, it's rivalry weekend. The moment itself is so tricky. There's so much emotion baked into it. It's hard to win a rivalry game. That's why you see so many teams struggle and scratch and claw for the duration of 4 quarters to get it done. Oregon had a tricky spot here. Yes, they were at home. I understand that. But for Oregon State, man, like, this was a chance for them to ruin Oregon's chances at a college football playoff berth. This was a chance for them coming off a tough loss against Oregon State where they played them to 2 points. You maybe thought even there's a little bit of confidence baked in for Oregon State. Also, they had the confidence of beating Oregon last year. Like, this was a spot now that could have been very tricky for Oregon. And all Oregon did, again, gain leverage, throw haymakers, night-night. That was how the game went. And so going back to what I just said, I have never seen at this point in the season the moment have an impact on Oregon. Like, yes, they lost that game to Washington, but it wasn't because the moment was too big for Oregon, because Washington is a really freaking good football team. And there was never a letdown after that. There was never a spot where you saw Oregon kind of look vulnerable and have trouble and sort of sleepwalk through a game. And they were fortunate to win that one. It was like, no, Oregon lost that game, hit the reset button, and then just went crazy on everybody else the rest of the way. That's who they've been. So if we're going to go ahead and assume that what we've seen from Oregon at this point is going to be true going forward, which I think is fair to assume at this point, if the moment never impacts Oregon, then it goes back to what happens on the field. It goes back to roster, it goes back to personnel, it goes back to X's and O's. And Oregon, the way they're built, we've said it here a lot, I think they can play with anybody. They're a Big Ten team in the interior, offensively and defensively. The numbers reflect that, holding teams to less than 100 yards rushing and having one of the best yards per carry numbers in the country. And then you got a quarterback who I think more than likely is going to win the Heisman Trophy if he takes care of business in the Pac-12 title game. He has that, queued up for him to make that happen. That's a dangerous combination. That formula in itself, that's lethal. And so what I think is also interesting about Oregon going forward here, if they can play with anybody and they continue to get better, like, I think you got to talk about them being a college football playoff team. And I think based on the resume, I know there's still some talk about Bama and what happens if, they beat Georgia and if Texas loses, like all that, it will take care of itself. But the growth mindset within this Oregon football team, when we look to the Pac-12 title game, I think it's going to be a different Oregon team than we saw in Seattle because of the way that Dan Lanning coaches and because of the way this team has evolved since that game. Like, this Oregon team hasn't stayed the same and just found ways to slowly but surely eke out wins. Like, they have been continuing to trend upward each and every single week and building on the last week and not being satisfied and continuing to stay in attack mode. And so, again, going forward now, we'll pick this game on Tuesday. But if we're expecting that Oregon team that was in Seattle to show up in Vegas this coming Friday, I think there's another thing coming. I think this team will be much improved from that game. I think the line in Vegas in itself is a little bit telling with it favoring Oregon by 7.5. Again, we'll give you our prediction of this game. We don't have one dialed in just yet. We'll give you our thoughts when that gets here. But Tuesday, dial in because we got a lot to say about Oregon and a lot to say about Washington. And that game itself will be a prize fight. And Oregon now, they've earned their right to have another chance at this. And if you avenge your only loss of the season, beating a top 4, heck, maybe a top 3 team in Washington when those rankings come out on Tuesday, you'd have to think that's a pretty nice resume booster, and the eye test itself probably wouldn't hurt too much for Oregon either. So again, Oregon, handling business. It was always about getting back to this moment for Oregon. It was always about winning the Pac-12 and then seeing where you stacked up. But I think you got to feel pretty good about Oregon right now when it comes to that playoff conversation. Should they handle business and run through the tape as Pac-12 champs? So we'll see what happens. Again, we'll give you our pick on Tuesday. Make sure to subscribe, follow me on Twitter and on Instagram at JD Paquel. Let me know your pick when it comes to this game on Friday. Appreciate y'all. We love y'all. We're going to keep this party rolling, and we will see y'all next time. Hey, y'all. Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also, be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.